My name's David Miller. I'm 35 years old, living in Chicago now, but the memory I'm about to share with you has haunted me for years. It's about my father, the man I thought would always be there, no matter how many times I pushed him away. See, growing up, my dad wasn't perfect. He worked long shifts at the factory, came home smelling like oil and metal, and sometimes he was too tired to even sit at the dinner table. But he tried. He always tried. He never missed my school plays, even if he came straight from work with grease on his hands. He never forgot my birthday, even when money was so tight he could only afford a simple chocolate bar and a handwritten note. But here's the thing. I didn't see his sacrifices when I was younger. I only saw the flaws. I saw the old beat-up car we drove when my friends had shiny new ones. I saw the worn-out shoes he wore year after year while I demanded the latest sneakers. And when I got older, I began to think of him as a burden. It hurts to even admit that now. The story I'm about to tell you isn't about a fight or a single mistake. It's about the last phone call I ignored from him. A call that could have changed everything. A call that I can never get back. And to understand why that moment still rips me apart inside, I need to take you back. Back to the last year I spent living under his roof. That's when things between us started to break. The cracks between us started small, the way they always do. I was 17 then, full of pride and foolish confidence, convinced I knew more about the world than the man who raised me. Dad would ask simple things, take out the trash, mow the lawn, help him fix the leaky faucet. And every time I'd roll my eyes, mutter under my breath, and tell him I was too busy. Busy with what? Hanging out with friends, scrolling on my phone, wasting hours doing nothing important. He never yelled at me, not really. That wasn't his way. He just gave me that look, the one where his eyes grew heavy, like the weight of the world had settled there. It made me angry, though I couldn't explain why at the time. I mistook his quiet disappointment for weakness. One night we got into it. I had come home late smelling like cheap beer, stumbling just enough for him to notice. He was waiting on the porch, arms crossed, his old flannel shirt hanging loose over his shoulders. "David," he said softly, "this isn't you." And I snapped. I told him he didn't know me, that he was just some old man stuck in the past, that I didn't need his advice. The words flew out like venom, sharp and cruel. And I'll never forget the way his face changed. It wasn't anger. It was hurt. A hurt so deep I had to look away. He didn't argue. He just nodded once, like he was storing my words somewhere inside him. And then he went inside. I should have apologized that night. I should have said something. But instead I told myself I was right, that he was the problem. That was the beginning of the silence between us. The silence grew thicker with every passing day. Breakfast used to be our little ritual. Dad would fry eggs, sometimes burn the toast, and joke that one day he'd finally get it right. But now, mornings were different. I'd rush out the door with a piece of bread in my hand, muttering a half-hearted bye without even looking at him. I could feel his eyes on me sometimes, like he wanted to say something, but held it back. Maybe he thought I wouldn't listen, and truth is he was right. Back then, I wouldn't have. The house started to feel smaller, not because of the walls, but because of the distance between us. Two people under one roof, living like strangers. He spent more time in the garage tinkering with tools and old radios, while I stayed in my room, headphones on, pretending I had better things to do. Then came the night that changed everything. We got into another fight. It wasn't even about anything big. I wanted money to go out with friends. He said no, said I should learn the value of earning it myself. I exploded, shouting words I can't take back. I remember slamming my bedroom door so hard the frame shook. And that night, lying in bed, the thought hit me, I don't need him. I can do better on my own. That was the seed, the idea that maybe my life would be easier if I walked away. It didn't take long for that seed to grow. Every little argument, every time he told me no, I twisted it into proof that he was holding me back. I started keeping score in my head, like some childish game. How many times he disappointed me, versus how many times he gave me what I wanted. And the list in my mind kept getting longer and longer, on the wrong side. One evening I came home late. My friends had convinced me to stay out after school, and I didn't bother telling him. When I walked through the door, Dad was waiting in his chair, arms crossed, his face tired but stern. He asked where I'd been, why I hadn't answered my phone. Something snapped in me. Instead of answering, I lashed out. I accused him of treating me like a child, of never trusting me, of not understanding the life I wanted. His eyes softened as I spoke, but that only made me angrier. I mistook his patience for weakness. Finally, I shouted the words that sealed it. "I don't need you anymore. You're just holding me back." The room went still. His shoulders slumped, his eyes glassy. But he didn't raise his voice. All he said was, "If that's how you feel, the door's right there." And for reasons I can't fully explain even now, I walked through it. The first few days after I left felt like freedom. I crashed on a buddy's couch, stayed up late without anyone questioning me, and spent my paycheck on things I wanted instead of bills or responsibilities. For the first time, I thought I was finally in control of my life, but freedom has a way of showing its teeth. By the end of the first month, the buddy's couch was no longer an option. His parents had enough of me. I bounced from one friend's place to another, each stay shorter than the last. My money dried up faster than I thought possible. Rent, food, gas, things Dad used to quietly make sure I had, now pressed down on me like weights I couldn't carry. One night, after skipping dinner, because I didn't have enough cash, I lay awake on a thin mattress in a damp basement. The excitement I once felt was gone, replaced by an emptiness I couldn't name. For the first time, I wondered if maybe I had made a mistake, but my pride whispered back, "No, you wanted this. You can't crawl back now." Weeks turned into months, and life outside my father's house became a slow grind. I picked up odd jobs, moving boxes at a warehouse, washing dishes at a diner, even sweeping floors in a mechanic's shop. The work was hard, the pay was small, and no one cared if I came home exhausted or if my hands were bleeding. I remember one night in particular. It was raining, cold, the kind of Kentucky rain that seeps into your bones. I was walking home from the diner, pockets nearly empty, when I passed a man and his son under a single umbrella. The boy was laughing about something, tugging at his father's coat, and the father just smiled, patient and warm. For a split second it was like I was looking at my younger self. Dad and I used to walk home from church like that, his hand on my shoulder, his voice steady and kind. I froze there on the sidewalk, watching them until they disappeared into the night. That's when it hit me. I hadn't just walked away from a house or rules, I'd walked away from love, from the only person who ever made sure I was never alone. But instead of turning back, I shoved the memory down and kept walking. Pride has a strange way of chaining you, even when all you want is to be free. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. I had been working double shifts at the warehouse, trying to keep up with rent and bills, but no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. My landlord didn't care about excuses, and one evening he stood at my door with that final notice in his hand. I begged him for another week, but he just shook his head. "Kid, life doesn't wait on pride," he said before walking away. That night I sat in my tiny, dim apartment with nothing but a half-empty box of crackers on the counter. My stomach growled, but worse than hunger was the silence, a silence so heavy it pressed down on my chest. No father humming in the next room, no voice reminding me that things would get better. I lay down on the thin mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, and for the first time I whispered into the dark, "Dad, I'm sorry." The words felt strange, almost foreign, but they cracked something inside me, because deep down I knew the truth. I hadn't just lost my father's roof. I'd lost his trust, his guidance, and his love. And it was all my doing. The next morning I couldn't take it anymore. The hunger, the shame, the silence, it all pushed me toward the one place I swore I'd never go back to. My father's house. I walked down the familiar road, each step heavier than the last. My shoes were worn thin, the soles almost breaking, and every crack in the sidewalk felt like it was mocking me. The trees I had played under as a kid now stood tall and unbothered, watching me return like a soldier walking home in defeat. When I reached the front porch, I froze. The old wooden steps creaked the same way they always had, but I couldn't bring myself to knock. My hand hovered in the air, trembling. What if he slammed the door in my face? What if he had already replaced me with silence and peace? I stood there for what felt like an eternity, until the door opened on its own. My father was standing there. His hair had grown grayer, his face lined deeper, but his eyes, those same steady eyes, locked onto mine. We didn't speak at first. I couldn't. My throat was tight, my chest heavy. But then, barely above a whisper, I said the words I had been too proud to say for years. "Dad, I need you." His jaw tightened, his eyes glistened, and for a moment I thought he'd turn me away. Instead, he stepped aside and simply said, "Come in, son." Stepping inside felt like walking into another lifetime. The same old couch, the same smell of coffee and wood polish, the same quiet hum of the clock on the wall. Nothing had changed, except me. I sat down, my hands shaking, as my father eased himself into his chair across from me. For a while the silence was louder than words. I stared at the floor, ashamed, until I finally blurted out, "I thought I was better off without you. I thought I didn't need anyone. But I was wrong." My father leaned back, his eyes studying me, not with anger, but with something heavier. "Son," he said slowly, his voice rough from years of work and worry, "do you know what the hardest part of being your father has been? Watching you believe that I was your enemy, when all I ever wanted was to see you safe." His words hit harder than any punishment could. Tears blurred my vision. I wanted to apologize, to pour out everything at once, but he raised his hand gently. "I don't need an apology," he said. "I just need you to understand that running from love doesn't make you strong. It makes you lost, and I don't want to lose you anymore." That was it. The dam inside me broke. I wept like I hadn't since I was a child, the weight of my pride crashing down all at once, and for the first time in years my father stood, walked over, and wrapped his arms around me. It wasn't words that saved me that night. It was the quiet strength of a man who had never stopped being my father, even when I stopped being his son. That night marked the beginning of something I thought I had lost forever. I stayed at my father's house, not as a defeated man, but as a son who finally understood. Over the next few weeks I worked hard to get back on my feet, but this time I let my father guide me. We shared quiet meals, long talks, and even moments of laughter I never thought we'd have again. The house no longer felt like a place I had run from. It felt like home. Looking back now, I realized the mistake wasn't just in leaving. The mistake was in believing that independence meant shutting out the people who loved me most. My father wasn't perfect, but he was steady. He was the anchor I had been too blind to see. And here's the truth I want anyone listening to take with them. Pride can rob you of love, of family, of the moments you'll never get back. Don't wait until it's too late to see the value of the ones who raised you, who stood by you even when you pushed them away. Because at the end of the day, money fades, friends come and go, but the love of a parent, that's a kind of wealth you'll never replace. I almost lost it forever, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I never take it for granted again.